Hey everybody, this is Matt Orr from Wet Ink Games. I'm here with Tristan Zimmerman. He is the creator of the two-time ENNIE nominated blog, moltensulfur.com. He's also the writer of Making History, 3 one-session RPGs, and he also appears on the Dice Geeks Tabletop RPG Show. So we've got a writer, podcaster, and blogger here today. Tristan, how are you?
You know, I am doing as well as any of us are doing in this exciting lockdown world, but with that giant asterisk on it, I'm doing pretty good, Matt.
That's great. That's great. All right. So these are trying times. The people want to know where you stand, Tristan. We're going to have to.
Oh, okay.
So here's the important topics that we want to know where Tristan's at on. So are you for Tiwanaku or Great Zimbabwe?
I'm going to have to go with Great Zimbabwe.
How about the Viastos Disc or the Nebra Sky Shield?
Ooh, I know neither of them, so no
you
comment.
You can pass. Okay. Rongo Rongo or Linear A?
Linear A.
Herodotus or Thucydides?
Herodotus, hands down, fight me.
Lake Tanganyika or Lake Baikal?
Tanganyika, absolutely.
All right. Mary the First of Scotland or Elizabeth the First of England?
Elizabeth the First. I've never really seen Mary as anything more than a blip.
All right. And for the last one here, Celtic bog butter or Roman curse tablets?
Ooh, Roman curse tablets.
All right. So there you go. You know where Tristan stands on these important issues of the day.
And if anybody wants to be a Thucydides fanboy out there, you are wrong and also boring, and it is important that you know that about yourself.
All right. That was more fun than it should have been. Okay. So, Tristan, I have one of the first interactions that I had with you. Well, I saw you in real life at GenCon a year ago. But then I thought, I need Tristan's help on this next project. So I got to contact you. And one of the first messages that I received from you was, sorry, I won't be able to answer this email for a while because I've taken a trip to Isle Royale, which I knew what that was. It's an island in the middle of Lake Superior, which is, and I was like, of course he has. Of course he has. So please, Tristan, tell me about this trip because it sounds incredible.
Right. So about a year and a half ago, I got out of the service. I'd been in the service for a while, and I said, "Hey, look at me. I'm young. I have no responsibilities. I should take advantage of this opportunity to do some awesome trips. Do the sort of thing that I may never have the opportunity to do again, right? I may never again have the freedom and the good health all at the same time. So I was just, being a bum and traveling all over the States and visiting national parks and doing awesome hiking and backpacking. It was a great time. And kind of the cherry on top of that was this week-long trip I made to Isle Royale. Isle Royale, pronounced that way, even though it is clearly spelled Royale, but whatever, welcome to America. Isle Royale is a 40 or 50 mile long island out there in Lake Superior. And it is an absolutely incredible place. It is the least traveled national park in the lower 48. And that is due in no small part to the fact that it is a friggin' island. You can't just get in the Suburban and drive out there. It is a, I think, 6-hour one-way ferry ride from Houghton, Michigan on the UP. There's also a ferry that heads out from Minnesota as well, if you prefer that. But you have to get on this ferry and take your 6-hour trip out there. The ferry ride itself, honestly, is one of the highlights for me. I'm a big boat and ship nerd, which is one of the reasons you asked me to write on Tears in the Sea. And so it was just super exciting to be on there and talk a little bit of shop with the merchant mariners and national park employees who serve as the crew of this ferry, and she's an absolutely delightful vessel. And then you get out there, and there's no roads on Isle Royal. There's just the hiking paths. And it has an absolutely absurdly large moose population, and uh, uh, and also a very thoroughly studied pair of wolf packs that are really cool, and
Okay.
nobody ever sees them because they're very secretive. But yeah, and then I just threw a pack on and was like, cool, I'm just going to go exist on this island for a week. I thought about doing a through hike from one end of the island to the other down the Greenstone Trail, and decided against it, but definitely want to go back someday and do that because it is super cool. Um, the whole island is just this gorgeous, um, like northern woods foliage complex. There's a lot of wildlife because there's not a lot of people. And, there's wild blueberries along the ridge that runs the length of the island, and there's really cool geology. That's the whole thing, and there's a lot of. I mean, it was an amazing experience, absolutely wonderful, and I hope to go back soon.
Amazing. Uh, Thanks. That's really cool. I've traveled around the southern shore of Lake Superior on a trip one year, and it was
Mhm.
always, that talking about the North Woods kind of feel, but it was always through the small towns that are part of that area of the country. But it would be amazing to be really out there camping or hiking through the real wilderness there. It would be amazing. Okay, so as you've mentioned and I've mentioned, we you worked on a project for Wet Ink Games, and you were the lead writer of Tears in the Sea, the campaign dossier for one of the campaign dossiers for Never Going Home. Uh, tell us about some of your work on that. Like, what do you I don't know, what are you proud of? What was the hardest to do? What were you most excited to do? Like, yeah, just talk about that book.
So Tears in the Sea, yeah, it's a campaign dossier, a splat book essentially for Never Going Home. Your really delightful, delightful is maybe the wrong word, but by God, I'm gonna stick with it. Your delightful occult World War I RPG, um, and Tears in the Sea is about the occult uh, war in the North Sea. It's the naval supplement. Um, and it presents a campaign frame where the PCs are the crew of a U-boat, but it's an awful hell U-boat. And the general premise that I pitched to you, and for some reason you were like, yeah, sure, let's do it. I'll pay you money to lead write this. I'll pay money for other people to write on this, which doesn't show great judgment on your part, but whatever. The premise that I pitched to you was, okay, so a few months before the campaign starts, a U-boat pulls back into harbor, and they open up the hatches and they look inside, and the crew has been reduced to this awful messy protoplasm that just like coats every surface of the interior of the submarine, and is like, it's this awful flesh machine amalgam as the undifferentiated flesh of the sailors has fused with the machine of the submarine. And like as you're wandering through, and of course now the inside is smaller because of all the flesh, and it's sweaty and it's warm to the touch, and like there's only one NPC remaining, and that is the screaming, raving head of the skipper of this U-boat. And the German Navy basically looks around and says, well, the war's really touch and go right now. We can't really afford to spare any U-boats, so you five, or whatever the size of your party, congratulations, you're now the crew of this U-boat. Figure it out, make it happen, go sink some British merchant shipping. and the 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 campaign book Tears in the Sea then presents rules for, okay, so the broader never going home rule set kind of assumes this small unit tactics thing that's typical to RPGs. How on earth do you integrate that into a submarine? And um, and then on top of that presents, I want to say, 5 short adventures that you can go on that are connected into a larger campaign frame and tell a larger story about um, trying to hunt down this allied occult plan that will win the naval war for the Allies, and you're of course playing for the Germans, so you don't want that. The rules, I won't lie to you, I am very proud of the those rule set. The rules as written are based on rules that I've been kicking around in my own head for a long time. Based on my own experiences at sea. So I went to sea first, before my first birthday. I spent 6 years in the Navy. I've circumnavigated the globe. I crossed the line off Somalia. Um, there are a lot of people out there who are a lot saltier than I am. I am not making a claim to being, I'm not Tristan Jones, I'm just Tristan Zimmerman. But I've been there. I've been there. I've lived it. I know the ocean. I know life at sea. And um, one of the things about naval and maritime affairs is um, it's all about teamwork, and it's about teamwork in ways that are frankly incompatible with the normal way that RPGs approach combat encounters, really just encounters more broadly. The way you can think about it is, for the Army, the smallest meaningful unit, the smallest unit that can contribute, is a single soldier and his rifle. One guy with a rifle can make a meaningful contribution on a battlefield. He can operate somewhat independently. He probably shouldn't, but he can. Um, Ships don't work that way. The smallest meaningful unit is the ship. And the ship, depending on the size, may have a few dozen crew. It may have thousands of sailors aboard her. And sorry, the ship, the unit as a whole, is the smallest meaningful unit. So how on earth do you do that in an RPG that still leaves room for the individual players to feel like they are making meaningful contributions, to feel like they are making interesting choices, that they're not just pressing, the do the same thing every time button? Because we have all played those usually science fiction games, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we have all the small unit tactics rules and the whatever, but it's science fiction. So, okay, we'll slap you are the crew of a starship rules on there. And invariably, what winds up happening is you've got one guy, he's either the captain or the helmsman, who basically just winds up running the whole combat, right? And he's Monday morning quarterbacking what everybody else is doing, and everybody else is just like, well, Justin says I should do this, so I'm just going to do this. So, okay, I did the thing. Or even worse, this one guy is the only one making a meaningful decision, and everybody else is just like, yep, I sure am on the bridge while this happens. And I didn't want it to be like that. So I had to write a rule system for this that did both, that where everybody was making a meaningful contribution and had interesting decisions to make, and yet also maintain the idea that the ship, the submarine, so the boat in this case, is the smallest meaningful contributing unit. And so kind of the middle line that I cut there is that there are numerous stations on the bridge, but there are more stations than there are PCs. So every time it's your turn, you have to decide where in the teeny tiny little cramped CIC aboard the submarine, where do you run to and what do you do? And there's more work that needs to be done than can be reasonably done by the PCs. So it's all a question of like, oh geez, should I handle damage control right now? Should we change course? Should we fire a torpedo? Because there's just more work that needs to be done than there are people available to do it. So I think in my playtesting, it seemed to work out well, and it was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, I really like that system that you're talking about. It is, and your experience there as a Navy person, like to say that method that you just talked about, the smallest meaningful unit, right? That is, um, I've played in my own playing of Never Going Home. Yeah, like you've got one person that's like, well, I'll just go out there and shoot the guy, and like it's you can't do that if you're on the ship, right? It's you've got to operate together, and so yeah, the that pressure to be like, which of these seats are we going to fill right now, and it kind of that horror aspect of that, like there is, like you just said, there's more work to be done. It's like that's the horror of being confined in the little box, of like there's more that we would like to be doing, but there just isn't enough. The scarce resource, um, that's part of the Never Going Home thing. You've got the
Yep,
cards and
absolutely.
it's scarce resources. So yeah, I think you did a great job with it.
Oh,
And
thank you. It was a lot of fun to write.
yeah, so we can't wait to bring it to the people. Should be, I think we're sort of announcing that we're looking at September is when we're hoping to get it ready to be. That's the mailing, so it should be done and in people's hands digitally before then. But the September, we've had to, because of the year it's been, production has been slowed
Oh, has it been an unusual year in some way?
in some way or another. It has been. So September for everybody to look forward to that, and yeah, it'll be great. You can thanks for all your work on it. So it's that one's gonna be good. That one's gonna be great. All right, Tristan, what else have you got? What else are you up to in the nerdosphere or in your own life or anywhere else that you'd like to tell us about? What else is on deck for you?
So I am up for an ENNIE this year. I was nominated for an ENNIE for my Molten Sulfur blog. This is the second year in the row that the Molten Sulfur blog has been up for an ENNIE for best online content.
We got some good vibes for that.
Oh, thank you. And the Molten Sulfur blog is my blog where every week I put out free gaming content drawn from real life history and folklore. So I find some neat thing in the real world, whether that is an interesting historical incident that would make a great template for an adventure in your fictional campaign setting. Maybe it is a really interesting historical person who would make a great template for a fictional NPC, a great place that would make a great adventure site in your, again, fictionalized world. So I don't just describe, hey, here's what's cool about this, though. Yeah, here's what's cool about this.
Right.
But also, how do you file off the serial numbers so that you can drop it into your fictional campaign setting? Because I do genuinely believe that gaming that is based on real history, even if it's not historical fiction per se, but gaming that is based on real history, real folklore, real science, real stuff, is richer and is more compelling, and that players can't always tell, like, I think you're using something from, I think that NPC is based on the exile arc in the Abbasid Caliphate. But I do think that they can tell that this is richer, that this is more engaging, that this sucks me in more. And that they appreciate that difference. And then also, I pull real myths and folkloric tales and all sorts of fun stuff on the Molten Sulfur blog. So that is at moltensulfur.com, or you can just Google Molten Sulfur blog, and that is an enormous amount of fun. I appear every 2 months on the Dice Geeks podcast. Dice Geeks is a really great RPG podcast show that I would recommend to any of you out in the audience. Dice Geeks does interviews with people out there in the RPGO sphere, and honestly just has a really good track record of getting interesting and compelling guests. So it's worth a listen. and I'm on every 2 months to usually talk about 3 items that have been in the blog recently, and me and Matt, not you, Matt, but other Matt, Dice Geeks
Hey,
Matt,
yeah,
kind of talk through like, okay, what's going on with this topic? Like, why is it interesting? What's cool about it? And then we just sort of bounce ideas off of each other about, how can we use this in a fictional RPG gaming context? So that's a lot of fun. Um, I am working right now on my 4th book. This book will be my first standalone traditional style RPG. My most recent book, Making History, 3 one-session RPGs, is what it says on the cover. It's 3 one-session RPGs drawn from real history, and that is a lot of fun. But Shanty Hunters, my next book, is a game about collecting magical sea shanties in the year 1880. And the PCs are sailors and scholars who have a perverse drive to collect these sea shanties. And the book will present just a whole bunch of real historical sea shanties. And recommendations on how to write your own if you want, or adapt ahistorical sea shanties. But the PCs are out there collecting sea shanties, documenting them as they hear them on the high seas. But there is some supernatural
okay.
being out there, some nemesis of the party
Hmm.
that does not like it that these sea shanties are being documented. And every time you document a sea shanty, every time you're like, oh, I've got a new pump shanty going over there. Let me write that down real quick. Like, nice job, jerk, because the supernatural being will act upon that.
Hmm.
And usually what that means is a recapitulation of the imagery in the sea shanty. So a lot of shanties, a lot of real historical shanties have, they either tell stories, and the stories are often bad, and you don't want those stories being recapitulated aboard your ship, or they have really vivid imagery. Um, and so if you've got imagery of storms or monsters or curious goings on that are in the
Yeah,
shanty, well, bad news bears, they are going to be recapitulated aboard your ship, and you now have a responsibility to save the ship, save yourselves, save the poor NPCs who did not ask for any of this to happen to
sure.
them.
Right.
And use your knowledge of the shanty, because you all have the shanty in front of you on a handout or what have you, and uh, use that to try to predict what's going to happen before it happens and try to get ahead of it. And if
Okay.
you're ahead of it, maybe you'll be more successful in saving the ship and saving yourselves, and saving the innocents around you. And if you're behind the 8 ball, well, there are clues hopefully in the shanty that maybe you can decipher to figure out what you can do about this problem that you find yourselves in. So I've been playtesting that for a few months now, and it's been really delightful. Everybody seems to be having a lot of fun with the sea shanties and the maritime environments and the weird goings on.
Sounds
And
great.
so that'll be coming to Kickstarter. I don't know, maybe in a year or so.
Sounds great. That sounds amazing. Anything else you want to plug real quick? Are we gonna do? We're gonna move on to our closing game here that we've got planned.
I would say let's move on to the closing game.
All right, excellent. So this is a game that it may change throughout I don't know what I'm calling it is what did I call it, the 5 minute pitch a thon. I don't know what I even told you it was going to be called before, but the we call it pitchorama. I don't know anyway, but
Pitchorama.
the I'll write that down. It's a good one. But the idea is that I've got a couple hooks here, a couple, just 2 pieces of thing, and we're going to start with that, and we're going to give ourselves 5 minutes, and we're going to rough out an idea. Like, it could be a board game or a RPG, probably, because we're both RPG people. But like, what else would we need to know to make this the game? What else would we fit in? Or we'll kind of roughly do it. So if that makes sense to you.
Yeah,
uh,
let's do it.
okay, so I'm going to start here, and so my two pieces are the sort of like 17th century trapper hunter, like backwoods North America kind of stuff, like going and getting the beaver pelts and having conflict, but also cooperation with native peoples and stuff like that. I want all of that feeling, but I want it sci-fi.
But sci-fi.
Right. So I don't know, like that. What would this even like? Because you get so many games that are like barren planets and like humans going and setting up colonies, moon bases and stuff, or you get like conflict with aliens in spaceships and laser gun battles between fighters and stuff like that. But I'm looking for something that's kind of in between, where you get kind of this like, it's almost like the Martian, but the Martians are there, right? Like he's got to survive on his own because he's the mountain man astronaut, but also like maybe he can go talk to the Martians and the Martians know some stuff, you know, like
So I think one thing that's going to be important for such a game, both because it gets into the feel, since we're replicating the feel, which is a very different thing from the actuality,
mm-hmm,
but also to make the game ethical, which is
sure,
something that's really not only important but also difficult to do with any game that is inspired by anything involving Indigenous history.
fair,
And I
absolutely
think
fair.
I think what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to invert the power dynamic.
Okay.
We're going to need to make it so that the the aliens are more have more power in a very real sense, not only than our spaceman on Mars, but also that the Martians have more power than the Earthers, like in
Mm,
aggregate. Um, would it be so we invert that feel so that you are a spaceman on uh, on a powerful developed world where you are almost beneath their notice.
mm.
um
I can see that. I can see that. It's
Now,
almost like there's a some sort of, it's like the risk, I mean the risk reward thing was always sort of part of that solitary trapper experience. You know, you could go a little bit further into the woods to get a few more skins, but then you were that much further away from where they were valuable back in Montreal or wherever you were going back to.
mhm,
uh, you know, so maybe there is something like, it's almost like, perhaps it's almost like you're the equivalent of like a rat in their sewer, right? Where like
yes,
there's some sort of byproduct of their civilization that is valuable to you as the PC, but like you can't dismantle their sewer to get it because then they'll notice you, you know.
because then they'll wipe you out. And as it stands, like rats in New York City, as long as you don't appear in someone's apartment, they don't care whether you exist or not.
Ooh.
And yeah, so you have your little Montreal equivalent on the outskirts of, like, outside of the city, and you have to decide how far you push into the city. And then, like, okay, I'm in the city, like, how far am I willing to push into this building? um, you also have to be careful about otherizing,
Of course.
about, so it's important that the aliens be relatable. We can make the aliens big, just like the rat. If the aliens are enormous, then we can make them psychologically, culturally very human and
Mm,
relatable, so that it's not just like, oh, those native people, they're sure not people. um, but
right.
because of the size difference, which also then feeds into the power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
um, and yeah, so you are, and then it becomes a almost a stealthy game of, like, okay, well, maybe I do want to push into someone's apartment, but I have to make sure I'm not seen. And if
Right.
you and people like you and the rest of the party make yourself too much of a nuisance,
Oh man,
5 minutes.
that's our 5 minutes.
All right.
I can't get it to stop now. All right, so
5 minutes forever.
5 minutes forever. That's pretty good. There might be some ideas there, and TM, all the viewers. We're working on this, not you guys. But Tristan, it's been a lot of fun to talk to you today. Thank you for being here on for our Gen Con 2020 homebound coverage. I've been saying, like, in my mind, I haven't actually said this out loud yet. Everyone is Gen Camp this year. So everyone. So here we are. This is our Gen Con coverage. Thank you for being here with us today, and you have a great time let's have a great time today, the rest of this week. Sorry, that was not great.
Well, thank you, Matt. It was really wonderful to be on.
All right. Thank you for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.